In this video, I'm going to show you how to outline a book summary. Now, this is the fourth step. We've done several previous steps to read the book, to highlight it, to export those highlights, to progressively summarize those exports. It's been actually quite a bit of work, but this is where it all begins to pay off, because what we want to do is by the time we sit down to write, we want all of the thinking or most of the thinking to have already been done at that point. When people sit down to try to do the thinking and the writing at the same time, it's extremely difficult, okay? So that's where the outline comes in. The outline is basically a plan. It's a plan for when you sit down to actually do the writing in the next step. The whole logic, the whole sequence of arguments and supporting points is done. This is such a powerful way of writing, to have all the sequence and all the supporting material right there, right at hand, so you don't have to interrupt the flow of writing to go search something on Google or research something or read a book. It's all right there in front of you. So let's take a look at what it looks like to create an outline for a book summary. So here we are back inside Evernote, which is the notes app that I use, looking at the progressively summarized notes that we looked at in the previous step. So one thing I want to observe is it's now been, I think, 4 or 5 days since I've seen this. It was last week that I left off. And not only is that okay that some time has passed since I last saw this, it's actually the best situation. It's actually preferable. It's actually good that I've sort of stepped away, gained some perspective, and that I've kind of forgotten a lot of what is contained inside this note. That means that I can kind of see it with fresh eyes, with beginner's eyes. That really is an important component of being objective and kind of just evaluating the ideas in this note from a neutral point of view. So what I'm going to do is really just leave these notes as they are, because there's value in kind of having them in the original order, the original language, just as I found them. But I'm going to create a new note where I'm going to remix these points, right? I'm going to pull out those yellow highlights and some of the bold ones you see and put them in my own structure, in my own logic, in my own words. So let's start with just the setup of the workspace. What I like to do is open up this note in its own window. In Evernote, you do that with a simple double click. And then I'm going to put this note on the left side of the screen. Now, you can do that just by, the usual way of resizing it, or you can use what's called a windowing solution. So I'll show you what it looks like first. If I get the top title bar or menu bar of this window and I just drag it all the way to the left, see how it darkens the left half of the screen, and I let go, it automatically sizes the note to just the left 50% of my screen. Okay, so really there's no advantage over doing it manually, except you just do it a little bit faster. And if you're curious which windowing app I use, it's right here. It is called Magnet. I'll drop a link to that in the comments. So this is the left-hand side. This is kind of the source that I'm working with. But then I'm also going to create a new note, which is, I'll just call it Book Summary Work Clean, which is the new title of this book. Okay, so now that it's created, I can double click it here and do the same thing on the right. I'm now going to move to the previous note by doing Command tilde. Tilde is the key at the very top left of your keyboard. It kind of looks like a squiggly line. So I'm going to do Command tilde, which a lot of people don't know is a shortcut, at least on the Mac, to quickly move between windows within the same program. Okay, so I just tapped it a few times, and now I have my workspace, my source notes on the left and my outline on the right. So now I'm ready to work. Okay, so we have a good size note here. I think it's about 9,000 words, but as I said before, I'm going to try to do this in one pass. What that means is I have to move fast. I can't get bogged down in one idea, in one paragraph. It's really my motto that I always say, which is move quickly, touch lightly, which is the motto to keep things moving, keep things flowing, keep things fluid, rather than getting bogged down and stuck in one thing. So let's look at what this is going to look like. I'm going to start by creating the outline here, which you can do by clicking this little bullet button here, or you can do Shift Command U, which creates a bullet point. I like outlines just because they're quick and easy. You can just type something, hit enter, and it creates a new bullet. You can also do tab to indent, shift tab to unindent, and it's just kind of a fast and lightweight way of structuring a note. So what I'm going to do is really mostly copy paste. I'm going to ask myself for each one of these points, what is the question that it's answering, or what is the bigger picture idea that it's a part of, or how could I use it to support something I'm trying to say, or how is it useful to address a common challenge or question that people have. These are kind of you could call them meta questions, right? These sort of big picture questions that you can keep in mind. So for example, let's just get concrete here. A system to organize ourselves and manage our work. So what immediately jumps out is this is kind of an answer to the question that I know everyone is going to have, which is, what is mise en place, right? So I'm just going to say, oops. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. So what's interesting is I'm kind of taking it out of context, right? He's using it as this sort of theoretical point. Imagine if we had this. But what he's really getting at, and I'm kind of just being more direct about it, is that what he's offering to us in this book is a system to organize ourselves and manage our work. So you can see the difference right here between a book on the left and a blog post. A book can kind of tease you, it can kind of slowly build up to a point, it can go off on kind of these flights of fancy. With a blog post, it's more utilitarian. I just want to give people the answer. So I'm just going to put that right there. And then this right here, you can notice actually, first of all, that I'm kind of ignoring everything that is not bolded or highlighted. You know, my eyes kind of pick it up automatically, right? You can't avoid these other non-bolded text, which is kind of in your peripheral vision. But for the most part, I'm going to focus on the bolded layer 2, as I call them, and highlighted layer 3 sections. Okay, so this one jumped out at me, and now I realize I think it's because it kind of answers the question, why does it matter? Right? Who cares? No one actually inherently cares about a system. They care about it because it helps channel their energies, thoughts, and emotions productively. Right? The original author didn't even mean it really in that sense, but I'm taking it out of context so that I can answer the questions that people are going to have. So let's keep moving here. 3 universal values. So this jumps out at me as sort of a, I'm just going to call it for now main principles of mise en place. Okay, that might change in the future. For example, I have a feeling I may move this up to the top, and this may become the 3 parts of the whole piece. You know, part 1 preparation, part 1 process, part 1 presence. This might actually be a great 3-part structure, but I'm always free to do that later. So for now, I'm just trying to move in a kind of linearly in a straight line and not do too much in-depth thinking. Okay, so 10 distinct behaviors, each with its own chapter. Okay, that could also be, it's interesting, he doesn't say what those are here, but if I decide the 3-part structure maybe isn't detailed enough, I could go into the 10 distinct behaviors. So I'm just going to put that there as a kind of placeholder. Basically, I know, if I come across this point in my outline and I want more detail on these 10 distinct behaviors, I might even highlight these here. Then I can go in and see the table of contents, which is going to tell me what they are. Okay. So I bolded that, but I'm not going to keep it. Just doesn't seem relevant. Okay, so this is interesting. This phrase, by this point, it's the 5th time I'm seeing it. First time was when I read the book. Second was when I exported my highlights. Third was when I bolded this phrase. Fourth was when I highlighted the first part of the sentence. And now 5th time is when I'm creating my outline. By this point, I'm very, very familiar with this phrase. Right, and this is important because it's not like I'm reading it and just, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. Personal career trajectories, that would require me to do a lot of in-depth thinking and really reflect on it. But as soon as my eyes landed on personal career trajectories, my sense of recognition kicked in, and I thought, oh, my dear friend, my well-known acquaintance, which is this sentence, I already expected you. I already know you. I already know, the sort of subconscious back of my mind has already been thinking about this sentence without any effort on my part. So I kind of instantly know how I'm going to use it, which is I'm actually going to keep the global economy and say, I'm going to put it right in here. So after what is it and why does it matter, I'm going to say, what does it have to do with modern knowledge work? Okay, so I just went to the end of the sentence, hit return to create a new line, hit tab, and then did Command V to paste. You can see how fast I'm moving here. Okay, so this is important and actually is a question that I know I have to answer in almost everything I write. Because I'm writing about so many diverse topics that aren't normally a part of productivity, I kind of constantly have to be telling my readership, what the heck does this have to do with productivity? What does it have to do with knowledge work? Because that's the reason they follow me, right? They don't follow me for cooking advice. They don't follow me for travel stories. They follow me for productivity help. So I kind of always want to be closing that loop back to the overarching topic of my blog, even as I expand what it means to be productive, far, far larger than how people traditionally think of it. So this sentence is really crucial because it connects what we can learn from chefs through their system of mise en place in a way that helps us deal with the changing global economy, which is basically our personal career trajectories are starting to look more like chefs, starting to be more about short stints, gigs, working with a team, say at a restaurant for some period of time, learning what there is to learn and then moving on. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. Learn resiliency. This is just kind of a term I like. I might put that just below here. Okay, this is just kind of an FYI for my own purposes. Don't need to include that in my summary. Okay, so here's the other paragraph that we looked at before, which answers this question further. So I'm going to say it's 6 things. Put a colon there. It is a philosophy, what chefs believe. It's a system, what chefs do. It's an ethical code. It is an array of ingredients at their station. It's their setup. It's the practice of preparing that setup. It's the mindset. Okay. This is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so, I could seriously spend half an hour just dissecting these. I could say, what does each of these correspond to with the modern knowledge worker? I might insert a table here with 2 columns and say, column on the left, chefs, column on the right, knowledge workers. But I'm not going to get bogged down in that. As I said, I can always come back to this. And actually, the next time I come back to it, I'm probably going to have more clarity and more objectivity. So for now, let's just leave that. Okay, so this is a great one, and it kind of answers this one, right? You could easily substitute knowledge workers can't master physical organization without first organizing their minds, and it would be just as true. Okay, thought that was interesting. So this is interesting because now we're starting to get into details. Okay, when it comes to a chef's repeated muscle movements, it's kind of obvious. How to salt something, how to flip an egg, how to sear a steak, whatever it is. But this idea that our habitual movements have to be quick and small is really not something that knowledge workers think about. We don't think about our work as having a manual component, which I think it very much does. So I'm going to put here parallels to modern knowledge work and just stick that there. Same thing here. We think of it's obvious that all the ingredients or the tools for cooking should be in one area. We don't think of that in knowledge work. There's another clear lesson that we can learn. No transformation happens without heat. I might create a new section here, which is quotes. So this is interesting because so far it's looked like the sections that I'm going to be writing about kind of in order. What, why, what does it have to do with modern knowledge work? But it doesn't have to be only sections. These ones down here are more like categories. They're categories of main principles, parallels, quotes, right? So there's a mix here. Some of them are like supporting points under a question. Some are examples of ideas that fit within a category, and that's perfectly fine. Again, the whole point is to keep moving, keep making progress, maintain your momentum. Japanese chefs, okay. Okay, so this is interesting. Remember we talked about, small restaurants, mom and pop food operations, food carts, humble diners. They have scale, right? In these kind of small food establishments, they can use 1 or 2 employees to feed dozens up to hundreds per day. So I'm going to put that here. And now here's the thing. If I just put that here, I think it wouldn't be immediately clear to me what this refers to. It would take a few seconds to remember, oh, okay, this has to do with scale, because nothing here really mentions scale directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little subheading here that just says having a system allows small numbers of workers to scale their impact. I'm going to remove the formatting, so I don't think that this was something that came from the book. I'm going to indent this by hitting tab, and see what you have here. You have parallels to modern knowledge work as the main category. You have a point that clearly, because of the lack of formatting, is my words, and then you have a supporting point under that. So if I was reviewing this, my eye would kind of land upon this, and I would instantly know that whatever is below it is in support of it. You can see here I'm starting to create sort of a logical structure of points supporting other points. Okay, so this is interesting. Here's another example, which I'm just going to put right under here. Okay. So this is interesting because I previously, in my previous highlighting, thought I didn't really care much about the origins of mise en place. But now that I see the outline over here, especially this question, what is mise en place? I think that I should actually mention it. I'm sort of changing my mind. And this is really where progressive summarization shines, right? As you move through the steps, I'm not trying to imply that you never go back to a previous step, or you never change your mind, or you never change direction. In fact, you do those things constantly. But this is where you want not just, the furthest level of summarization, but multiple layers, right? The fact that I have all this surrounding text, even though it's not highlighted in yellow, means that I can look at this and say, oh, you know what? I've changed my mind. I actually do want to keep a little bit of historical background. So under what is mise en place, I'm going to put a subheading that just says historical background, keep it really brief, and just say who started it and when it was started. This is kind of a very nice supporting point here, which the author already provided me. It's in support of that point, or at least not in support, but it follows, right? This sentence is sort of an introduction, and then this sentence is the conclusion. It's kind of like an abbreviated, bookends from the beginning to an ending that the author presented in a way that kind of piques your curiosity. How did a 13-year-old boy in 1859 end up securing the global dominance of French cuisine? It's like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. So I'm just going to put a few points here, like the Moulin Rouge, which a lot of people have heard of. I'm going to put his time in the military. That's actually very interesting to shed light on how he even thought of this as a system. Where did he learn such a rigorous approach? So I'm going to put that here. Yeah, I guess we could put the different positions. Okay, replicable culinary assembly line. That's kind of a concluding point. That creates the bridge, see, between the culinary world and the military, manufacturing, operational world, which is the one that we're dealing with. I think that's enough of the background. Actually, maybe I'll just add this. Okay, that has to do with some specific story in the book, which I don't need. You can see I'm jumping huge swaths of text. You know, it kind of follows that if I'm not really interested in how Jeremy comforted himself with the conviction, etc., the fact that all this follows, and I can see Jeremy's name popping up here, tells me that this is all the story expanding upon this paragraph. So if this paragraph doesn't interest me, I just don't really need to dive into the details. So you can see this little progress scroll bar is jumping forward in leaps and bounds because I'm only picking out the very, very most relevant parts. Okay, so I thought this was a fascinating point, and I can tell not just because of the extensive amount of highlighting, but because so much around it is also bolded, right? So I don't really care about Jeremy, to be honest, but let me just borrow this. I think what interested me, I can kind of see here quickly, is that we spend so much money on our college education, so much money and time on our trade skills and understanding the world and our experience, but so much, but so little instruction on how to organize and conduct our workflows. It's kind of a huge blind spot, I think, that people have. So I kind of want to borrow this whole thing and put it under, where was the thing about parallels with modern knowledge work? Actually, I could put it a few places. And this is always the case. I could put it under why does it matter and kind of frame it a little bit differently. I could put it under what does it have to do with modern knowledge work. I could put it under parallels to modern knowledge work, but I think I'm actually going to put it right up at the actually I'm going to put it here. Why does it matter? Right? There's a sort of why theme here. You know, we spend all this money, but we don't organize our workflow, which is kind of the key that would allow us to unlock so much of the value that goes unlocked, that is not unlocked in these different things that we invest in. So that's that. Okay, this is kind of a different way of saying that. In fact, what I might do is, because this is so long, see how that's not really effective? It would take like a good 30 seconds to even just understand this. I'm going to move this down and put another phrase, we have never been taught how to manage that work, which is sort of a summary of what all this is trying to say. I'm going to put that as the heading and then put this under it. Now, isn't that interesting? Because this phrase actually came later. And you'll see this often with writing. A writer will build up to something and they'll explain, and then the actual main point comes after as a sort of conclusion, as a sort of summary. I know I often do this in my writing. So what I'm actually having to do here is reverse the order and put the conclusion of what he's trying to say in this paragraph first. And I know when I come across this in my writing, if I want more detail on this, if I want to say something else about it, all I have to do is go right below it, and I know I'm going to have lots of supporting points, right? What I might actually do to make this paragraph easier to read is break out the sentences into individual bullet points. That's kind of a trick, just to kind of make it more, each point more, make each point stand on its own more. Okay. Americans spend more than 10 billion. That's not really relevant to this. Okay, so this is interesting. Increasing workloads brought on by job consolidation. This is one of those kind of really big trends that doesn't get a lot of attention. Is, you know, in economic recessions, as things get automated, teams and companies get smaller, but the work doesn't get any less. In fact, it gets more. And so the amount that each employee is expected to take on is growing rapidly. It's not something that we talk about a lot, but I'm actually going to put that under parallels to modern knowledge work. Okay, I could spend a whole multiple paragraphs talking about this, mostly from my own thinking and my own ideas, because he doesn't talk about it that much. But for now, I'm just going to put it under there. Okay. What most of these techniques lack is a holistic approach. I'm going to put that under. Actually, why does it matter? Okay, organizing is not an intellectual exercise. So that reminds me of a line that we saw earlier about you can't master physical organization without first organizing your mind. That's kind of a supporting point. Okay, organizing your mind would be an intellectual exercise, right? But organizing is actually something that comes first before the intellectual part. It's a matter of physical organization. Okay, so the two kind of depend on each other. Okay, deluge of tasks. I really like the language here. It's really evocative. A deluge, it's a flood of tasks under tremendous deadline pressure, inadequate resources, constant stream of inputs and requests, too little time. You know, you really feel that this person gets what it's like. You know, it resonates with me. I feel like, you know, this has been my experience, and I know it's going to resonate with a lot of other people. So it's interesting because he's actually explicitly talking about the parallels between the kitchen and the office. So he's kind of already identified for me the parallels between the modern office and the modern kitchen. So I'm just going to get that whole thing, copy it, and put it under parallels here. Okay, you can see I'm already starting to gather, you know, I already have 5 supporting points under this idea of the parallels between cuisine and modern knowledge work. I mean, that's actually significant. I could do quite a bit of writing over just these points. And what's fascinating is these points were found all throughout the book. You would think a book would have all the related points in the same place, but that's really not the case. They tend to be spread out in different places. So by bringing them together, I sort of see it as that I'm compressing these ideas. I'm sort of distilling them down into a more potent mixture that's more dense. It's more insight dense, more insight rich. So when people read such an insight-rich paragraph or sentence, it feels more rewarding. They feel like they're really discovering something, learning something. Their mental models are being challenged and sort of deconstructed. And that's what leads to, at least for people who like that kind of thing, to a rewarding thing to read. Okay? So you can already see that distillation at work, where I've taken multiple points on a related idea and brought them all into one outline. Okay, let's keep going here. You can see I'm skipping a lot. Unrelenting honesty, I love that. Okay, I'm gonna add that here. We've already incorporated the 3 central values earlier, so I'm not gonna repeat those. It's not really relevant. Okay. That's interesting, but I don't really want to emphasize planning so much. I think that knowledge workers already know they're supposed to plan, they need to plan, so that's not gonna, I don't think that's gonna be a surprise to them. Again, I'm trying to include points that aren't just good advice or true, but points that actually are unexpected, points that are surprising. And I know from my experience with my audience that this isn't gonna be, the idea that you have to plan is not gonna be surprising. Sequence is everything, okay. This is an incredibly simple sentence that I think is actually really profound. So profound that I'm going to, let's see, I'm gonna make it its own section here, right? It's so important that this might even be the header to its whole own section. Okay, this is kind of has to do with sequencing, so I'm gonna put it under there as a supporting point. So does this. So it's interesting, this has to do with planning, but it's a slightly more subtle point. It's the idea that you don't want to underplan or overplan. I think generally people think, oh, the more planning, the better. And that's just kind of a depressing idea because it's never enough. You never actually get to the end of the planning. But this idea is more sophisticated, it's more subtle because it says the dangers of overplanning are just as bad as the dangers of underplanning. And that kind of, I notice in my own mind that it kind of makes me go, oh, interesting. That's a more sophisticated way of thinking about it. It's surprising to me, so it's probably going to be surprising to my audience. So let me get that, and I don't actually know what it has to do with sequence, but I'm just going to put it here as a placeholder for now. And later on, when I flesh out this section, if it doesn't fit, I can move it elsewhere. Okay, this is an interesting point. Put it under there also. You can see here, there's an interesting thing I'm noticing, which is it doesn't matter so much where you put things. You know, this outline is so dense, it's so succinct. You know, look, I'm already about almost halfway through my notes here, and I only have about a page or so of my outline. your outline is going to be exponentially shorter and more distilled than the notes on the left. And that means you're going to see everything here many, many times. Every single one of these points I'm going to revisit many, many times as I do my writing. So I can kind of just stick things wherever, you know, whatever first occurs to me is, oh, this could be interesting here. There's no right place. There's no, you know, correct location where everything needs to go. So let's talk about here. Arrangement. This has to do with something, this outline is actually getting long enough that I can't tell where everything is. So I might actually do a little search by doing Command F, which brings up this little search bar here. And then when I do the search, it's only within this note. Oh, okay. I guess the word arrangement doesn't appear. But how about setup? Okay, there's a couple instances. Oh, actually, there was a line about slow. Oh, I thought it was, oh, small. Okay. This is what I was thinking of. All the ingredients for one dish in one area, right? So I'm gonna put this as a supporting point. It's really interesting because I originally searched for arrangement, but the word arrangement doesn't appear in this piece, but it's kind of implied in this point. All the ingredients for one dish in one area, that's arrangement. This is where it's so important to do all this in one pass, right? The fact that I kind of knew this sentence was in this outline somewhere is because I just saw it about 10 minutes ago, right? So this is why it's important to kind of load it all up. Once we're doing the outline, load it all up into your mind because you start to see connections and patterns only because you have so many points just kind of loaded up into your mind. Okay, so let's keep going a few more here. Gain speed, so that's actually in support of this point, right? Even though, again, oh, it does say speed. Okay, so speed is there and then speed is here. So again, these points are found in very different parts of the book, but I've brought them together so that they can kind of reinforce each other. This is also a supporting point of this. Okay, oops. Where is that? Okay, sometimes it doesn't get indented and you have to do that yourself. Oh, actually I want this one below this one. Okay. Okay. So make the kitchen and the spaces within it as small as possible. Again, that has to do with this point about small as possible. You see the patterns, the connections. And it's interesting, this would not seem to have to do much with knowledge work, but I kind of want to make an argument that I'm not sure is going to work. It's going to be kind of a risk, it's going to be a leap, but I want to say that the same is true of digital spaces. You know, that just in the same way that it's important that kitchens be small, it's important that digital spaces also be small. Okay, what's next? Okay, these are some supporting points, but I'm not sure I want to get into this much detail. You know, within any metaphor comparing two things, there's always a point at which it breaks down. There's always a point where the metaphor kind of falls apart. So I don't know if I can think of any parallel with the dishwasher station. So let's skip that. This one does make sense though, anticipating your next move. That's gonna come, I think, when it comes to sequence. Okay, flow. So this is kind of neat. It's a definition. Flow is an internalization of the sequence and order of tasks, derived from an active mind that is always thinking one or two steps ahead. That's such a beautiful sentence. I'm going to add it to my quotes down here. Let's see. The less friction. Okay, so what did we say about friction? I think this section about speed is going to be the best for that. Eliminating resistance to higher orders of motion and process. Very cool. Same place. So really cool that he specifically talks about how the checklists and systems are the chef's external brain. I love that he has to put that in quotation marks because, you know, as he's writing this, that's a new idea for people. but it's exactly the kind of point that I'm making, and in some ways my entire summary is biased towards wanting to expand and explain what this really means for the mise en place to be a system, like an external brain that we can learn from. They concretize thinking before movement, assist thinking. Okay, so what I'm gonna do actually here is make this its own section, like here, and then this will be a supporting point under that section. Okay, so this is exactly the point I was saying earlier, that we spend so much time in virtual spaces and they have striking parallels to physical spaces, which would kind of make sense. So I'm going to take that and say, let's see, where did I talk about that? I think it's here where we talked about arrangements. Okay. I might actually even add, this section is getting long here, see? It's getting kind of hard to make sense of. So I'm going to add, without formatting, like a heading, put this under arrangement, and then this one here is about speed. So see how there's kind of topics that are emerging, right? He didn't say, oh, topic 1, speed, topic 2, arrangement. Those are patterns that I noticed point by point. You can see all the points that I've collected here. And then once I noticed that I had multiple points on the same topic, that's when I created the category. It's a completely bottom-up way of organizing. Instead of trying to do a top-down method, which would be trying to sort of determine in advance that the topics of speed and arrangement were ones that I thought were interesting. Okay, that's less relevant. Okay, very cool. So he's talking about that it's a system, but not a static system. It's a fluid system. So this is actually quite big picture, such that I want to add it all the way up here where we talk about why it matters. Okay, cleaning, a neutral posture. That is fascinating. It's kind of how I think of a weekly review. It's a neutral state, a 0 point, as they call it in cooking. So I want to put that in, let's put it under parallels as well. Okay. Oh, great. So we already have some supporting points here in the digital realm. So I'll just add that right under here. You can see I'm kind of using his examples as a bootstrap. And if I wanted to, I would just add some of my own examples here, and suddenly I would have a whole argument that I could make. Here's another one in support of this 0 point also applying to digital work. Creates important boundaries between the individual tasks. He actually has quite a few great points on this. Okay, excellent. So the first moments count more than later ones. Really subtle point, which is clearly under the heading of sequence, right? That's kind of what gives sequence its importance. The reason it's important is the first moments in whatever you're doing are more important. They count more than later ones. This is a key, this is kind of the answer to the question of why sequence is everything. Okay. There's a thing here about placeholders, which is also about sequence. You can see that sequence is emerging as quite an important topic here, along with speed and arrangement. This is kind of suggesting a different way of organizing my piece, which is around sequence, speed, and arrangement. Those could be kind of my 3 pillars, which is fascinating because the author didn't identify those as the 3 most interesting points. That's something that I'm adding. That's the lens through which I'm viewing this work. Okay, this is in support of the idea. So sometimes 2 seconds can cost you minutes or hours later on, and that supports the idea that first moments count more than later ones. Okay, so does this. This is another way of saying it. The present has incalculably more value than the future. The work comes in waves. Fascinating point. We really don't think about in knowledge work that it's not this constant steady stream. It's highly cyclical. So I'm going to put that under parallels down here. This is actually has more to do with, where did we see placeholders? I'm going to do a search for placeholder. There it is, supporting point. Okay. So here, I'm not sure I'm going to include this, but he makes this distinction, which I'm going to put here, just kind of randomly, which is immersive. Oops. Versus process time. I'm not sure this is so relevant to what I'm doing, but basically immersive time. So let's do subheadings here. So immersive time is that, and process time is this. You can see I'm kind of just creating a little, just kind of almost like a diagram, almost like a little, just very clear definitions. This goes under process time, and this one up here that we skipped is process time. Okay, immersive time. You know, it's so funny because in the author's original notes, he probably had some notes like this. He probably had, oh, immersive time is this and process is this. So when he created this paragraph over here, he was sort of merging or synthesizing his notes into prose, into flowing paragraphs. So what I'm sort of doing is doing the reverse. I'm pulling apart the opposite of synthesis. I'm pulling apart what he's saying because it's all kind of mixed together into a clear outline where I can understand for myself what exactly is immersive time and what are all the supporting points and examples versus what exactly is process time with all the supporting points and examples, right? So process time can be worth more than it seems. Let's put that down here. This is an example of process time. So is this. Okay, this is true, but kind of a timeless old saying, so not very surprising. This is related to what we said about placeholder. Okay, that's right here. I see placeholder right there. So is this. You can see there's actually quite a lot about placeholders. This is making me think that placeholders are important to me because I'm saving so many sentences related to it. Let's actually make a new little heading, which is placeholders. I remove the bolding so I know that that's my own heading. Ooh, process time unlocks time on your behalf. Okay, and then here's something about immersive time. And this is kind of a meta point about both of them, that a huge point of leverage is just quickly determining whether tasks require immersive time or process time, right? See how that's sort of like an introduction that I should mention before getting into the details of what they are. Okay. See, this is about immersive time. I already know. The reason I'm able to determine that so fast is I've seen this sentence multiple times. I've already thought about it. It's already been processing in the back of my mind. Okay, maintaining a finishing mentality. So that actually I feel like is sort of a new point. Has to do with sequence, but I can see there's so much that I've highlighted down here related to it that I'm going to make it its own section. Okay, this clearly has to do with finishing. You know, it's funny, I'm barely even reading these sentences. I'm just, my eyes, you can probably see in the video, are jumping back and forth because all I'm trying to do to determine when I see these sentences is which place in my outline it goes into, knowing that in the next step, I'm actually going to go through the outline. Okay, so this has to do with finishing. This has to do with finishing. This has to do with finishing. Now we're starting to explain why a finishing mentality is so important, that it is a way of preserving momentum and aggregation. So I'm going to put that also in here. I want to see that again next time I come back around to finishing. I want to know why it's important, why he thinks it's so critical. Same thing with this. Oh, I love this. You start a job and finish a job. I'm going to put that under quotes. So is this under finishing? Oops. Okay, sometimes the formatting gets weird. Okay. Now he's adding subtlety. He's adding sort of additional detail to the point of finishing. Definitely want to include that. Not being distracted by the periodic starting of other things. You can see there's quite a lot about finishing that I decided on a case-by-case basis was worth keeping. I mean, this might even become its whole own post. I mean, there's so much here. Okay. This is great. Wow, finishing might be one of the key takeaways from this whole thing. And notice that it's coming in the last third of my notes. You know, often a book, in fact, almost always, I'd say books, the value in a book is not evenly distributed. It's not like there is X units of value in each chapter the same. They tend to be unevenly distributed. So for me, I'm finding that a lot of the most rich, interesting, insightful content is in the last third of the book. I'm probably going to want to get those ideas and put them in the first third of my piece. That's how you create something, a summary, that can actually even be better, or at least, you know, in some sense more engaging than the original book. Okay, really wonderful thoughts here. Every time you deliver, you get that thing out of your life. Okay. Some strategies. Okay, it looks like we've now moved out of finishing, and these are just general strategies. Okay, so this makes me think I'm going to need a new section, which is going to be action steps. So if people like the post, they're going to want to know, okay, how do I put this into action? Might even break these out into their original bullet points. And since I'm a productivity guy, I want to be able to give them, you know, concrete things to do. Now, he gave me 4 here, but I have a feeling by the time I'm done cleaning up this outline, I'm going to find a lot more. So I can actually add to the action steps that he's included in his book. Okay, there are 2 kinds of perfectionists. Yes, this to me has to do with finishing mentality. You see why? Because why would people not have a finishing mentality? That's kind of obvious. It's because they're perfectionists, clearly. And there's 2 kinds of perfectionists, those who quit and those who keep working on the thing forever. And those really are the same. They lead to the same place, which is not finishing. Okay, this is actually, he's starting to now move away from finishing, but I think it also has to do with, you know, excellence is not just doing good work, it's delivering something. Key word is delivering, of the highest quality with all the constraints that delivery entails. This is a very nice paragraph. I'm going to move this under quotes. Okay. Oh, I love this, that we've come to see speed and urgency as antithetical to quality, but for a chef, and I would argue for a knowledge work as well, speed can be actually an integral component of quality. So I'm going to take this actually and find where we talked about speed, which is here, and put that under speed. Okay, equilibrium. Ooh, that's very interesting too. It's a more subtle point to speed, that you don't just want speed at all costs, you want balanced speed. You want enough speed that you are still in control. Okay, so interesting. We have this whole section with all these reasons that you should maximize speed, and here he talks about that you actually want to slow down. That what many skilled chefs do is slow down so that they can, in a way, funny enough, speed up, that they can deliver things faster by slowing down. It's kind of a paradox. Paradoxes are usually inherently fascinating. So I'm going to put this as a subpoint under equilibrium, that you want speed, but not so much speed that you lose equilibrium. Okay? A further way of saying that is precision must always precede speed. You can see if this becomes big enough, this might actually, in fact, let's just do that. There's a whole new section here, it looks like, called balance, that could be on an equal footing with arrangement, speed, and maybe even finishing. So this is just amazing. Who would have been able to predict that these were the main ideas that would emerge from this process? Finishing, speed, balance, arrangement. I mean, it's fascinating that you can just do these very kind of simple manual things like progressive summarization and outlining. And if you are aware of what's happening, the ideas will emerge. They'll reveal themselves to you. You don't even really have to be smart enough to figure this out on your own. Your notes tell you what are the most important parts. Okay, so let's just finish here. To be focused and aware on multiple levels. I'm going to put that in parallels. Okay. This is an interesting point about waste. Sometimes I think we forget that the purpose of higher efficiency is not just so that we can say we're more efficient, it's to minimize waste. It's to minimize waste of our time, of our energy, of our money, of our emotions. I mean, waste is kind of a tragedy. And we shouldn't want to waste anything. Waste there's no point to it. So I loved his story here of going through the experience of killing 3 sheep himself. Really gave him the mindset that ingredients are not to be wasted. That's a really important, profound point that I'm going to put under parallels to modern knowledge work. And interesting, completely eliminating waste is impossible, but it's a target that we want to move toward, which is total utilization. So we'll put that as a supporting point under the thing about not wasting. Being able to work in compressed time is a different way of saying speed. Okay, here he's the whole thing about the finishing mentality, that 90% of a task or a project that is 90% complete is actually 0% complete. So we can put that under the part about finishing. Okay, here's something else about sequence. You can see I'm barely taking the time to even see what the sentence is about before putting it in the first place that makes sense. Okay, grouping is about, where's arrangement? Okay. Ooh, I like this. It's kind of getting meta. A system of organization designed to maintain systems of organization. I'm going to put that up here under mise en place. Okay, and excellence requires human presence. I think we had something here about excellence. Excellence is quality delivered, so let's add this as a supporting point. Okay, now that's it. Okay, that wasn't easy exactly. What did it take? 30 minutes or so? 30-40 minutes. It was definitely much slower because I was talking through it. Normally it would take maybe more like 20-25 minutes, but you can see it was hard but not impossible. There was no point that I had to just come up with some genius breakthrough, or I had to really force myself to keep going. The whole thing was quite fluid and you could say even playful. You know, I just threw things. It's kind of like cooking, to be honest. I threw things together. Oh, what would this taste like over there? What would the contrast be with that flavor? What if I combine these 2 ingredients? What will happen? It's just information, right? You're not wasting anything. There's no terrible negative consequence if you put, 2 ingredients that shouldn't go together. It's just information. It's just ideas. You're free to play, to just experiment and see what goes together. And that's really what I encourage you to do when you create an outline of a book summary out of your notes. It's a really powerful process, led to tremendous insights. Even if I stopped here, I would have understood this book at 10 times the depth over versus just reading it in one straight pass. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for deep engagement where you're putting your own perspectives and values and opinions into the process. You can't avoid doing that. It's just part of the process. And through that deep engagement, you also happen to be creating a document, this one on the right, that is valuable. I mean, it's a far more structured and rigorous way of thinking through what are the main ideas and the main arguments of this book. And of course, it will be the perfect foundation for the next step, where we go into actually turning this into prose, turning it into a piece of writing that someone who has never encountered this concept of mise en place will be able to come in as a complete novice and really make sense of it in a tiny, tiny, tiny little fraction of the time that it would take to read the entire book that you've read.